the room. We do have Jane Walsh joining us virtually. So hi, Jane. Thanks for logging on. Jane, for your benefit, since I'm not sure what exactly the camera's showing, I think maybe Joey and Dylan over there. We have a nice group here today. Obviously, Justin Mondock, Director of Planning here at Eastgate. We've got Joey Kemp, Dylan, Mark Ragazine, Mary, Jacob, Jerome, Pete, Gerald, oh my gosh, Cassetta, Genevieve, and Greg. Good introduction. Lets everyone know who's in the room. And then to kick our meeting off, we've got a presentation today about economic development and broadband. And that's why Mark Ragazine's here. Move over to him and allow him to take it away.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, do a little bit of a lot, actually, if you will, here at Eastgate, wherever I'm needed. But my main day-to-day duties are economic development. And as of the last couple of years, Justin, would you say a lot of broadband too? So just diving right in. So essentially with the EDA, they have a bunch of different rolling programs every year, sort of whatever they want to try to make an economic impact on, whether it was post-COVID and disaster recovery and resiliency, whether they want to invest in public works and or short-term and long-term planning. The project before you is an example of economic recovery and resiliency. We've been looking for the last couple of years for a project up in Ashtabula County. And just as a sidebar, over the last 2 years, we've had 9 projects funded in Mahoney and Trumbull County. So we wanted to spread the love a little bit up north because they are a member of our economic development district. But the Port Authority up there, they acquired a property in Jefferson, about 1,000-acre former industrial site, actually the site of a coal-fired power plant up there in Jefferson. And essentially, the Port Authority has stepped in and they want to kind of see what the art of the possible is. So they came to us. They wanted to go after some EDA funding, and they were able to match it with cash. And they put the application in. About a month or two later, the EDA responded, and they invested $50,000 into the project. So the announcement was just made. Work will begin to put together an RFP. This project should get underway towards the end of the year. But just another example of sort of the investments the EDA makes. There's a lot of planning investment, but we've also had several construction projects. Greg, you would know the Golden Triangle down there in Warren that touches Warren. That was a $2.5 million investment by EDA. And then we've also had another industrial park in Jackson get about $2.5 million to do basically modernization, roadway widening, modern infrastructure that allows the trucks to get in and out of those corridors, speed up commerce, speed up efficiency, allows those companies to invest more themselves, bring on more employees. So it's just kind of a multiplier effect. Some projects nearing completion here. These are some of the ones that I've referenced were funded over the last few years. The Youngstown Crab Creek Corridor study down to our east here, basically beginning with Penguin City and then running north up to Liberty. An aging industrial corridor, a lot of former industry down there, but they've also seen a lot of blight, a lot of businesses leave that area. And so we helped Youngstown commission a study early this year that will be wrapping up. And basically it's going to be an implementation plan, a lot of recommendations. Greg, I keep picking on you, but similar to how the Golden Triangle sort of sought out investment. Again, what can you do to better market that corridor to bring employers back and to bring jobs back? Because there's a lot of potential down there, and Youngstown hopes to capitalize on that. The Youngstown Warren Regional Airport, this was a Western Reserve Port Authority grant. If Kevin was here, he'd probably have even more information than me, but essentially they acquired some property on the south side of the airport. And they're also looking at kind of what is the art of the possible in terms of, can we reposition our airport? I know everyone wants commercial aviation to come back, and they're working on that still, trying to get, an Allegiant or a Breeze in there and do, a couple times a week flights. But what can they do to sustain operations and make that airport more profitable and more sustainable? So is that the maintenance and repair of planes coming and going from either New York to Chicago, or planes that simply just want to touch down for maintenance, really? I mean, right now, a lot of planes have to go down to Columbus. And so it'd just be much more convenient if they were able to stop in Youngstown for that. They're also trying to expand their aviation training that they do up there. I know they have a Pittsburgh Institute of Aeronautics up on campus. And so they're looking to expand that, just really diversify what it is they do and not be so reliant on the future hope of commercial aviation to return. So that's kind of the gist of that plan. And then lastly, this plan's actually completed and it'll be on our website soon, but this was the Trumbull County Tourism Strategic Plan. Beth Carmichael and her team at the Tourism Bureau are handling that. Essentially, this is another one. They want to make the county more resilient to fluctuations in the economy, fluctuations in tourism, and generally just more resilient to the economic changes that we continue to experience between, inflation, at times high unemployment. Right now, it's not too bad, but understanding what we've come from in 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic and how devastating that was. A lot of these plans have pieces built in to make our region more diverse and resilient. So the EDA Recompete program, this is a program, a challenge, if you will, that they're running this year. And so what this will do is this is going to target areas where the prime age employment gap, which is 25 to 54 years, significantly trails the national average. So the Youngstown-Warren MSA fits the mold there. We actually trail the national average by a large margin. And so what this particular opportunity will do is this will seek to find workforce development, business, corridor revitalization type projects to try to drum up further job creation, help the businesses that have remained so the project we're looking at is the Better Belmont Coalition. They're looking at the corridor that runs between Youngstown and Liberty. This is an effort of the city, the township, Cityscape, the Healthy Community Partnership, a whole host of organizations. Eastgate's also participating. And essentially, they're going to see what they can do to continue to revitalize that corridor while attracting jobs for that age employment gap right there. So kind of interesting, not something we've been used to in the past from EDA, but offering this challenge, which applications were due today. I believe the Belmont Coalition's applied for roughly 500,000. So a pretty big grant if they were able to be successful in achieving that. So any questions along the way, don't hesitate to ask them, but happy to answer them all at the end too.
What was that dollar amount?
500,000. Okay. There's about 20 million available for strategy grants, and they said they're going to award at least 30. So I mean, they're going for a pretty large number with what is available, but I think they'll have a pretty good chance.
Do they plan to spend $500,000 on?
So they're going to continue their efforts. Essentially, it's all in their name. That's what the coalition's called, Building a Better Belmont. So they're just going to continue to look at ways to revitalize the corridor that runs from right over here all the way up through Belmont Avenue and Liberty. So how do they help the current employers along the corridor either reinvest, create further jobs? It's really an economic development type driver. So they're just going to look at different recommendations and things that a consultant might say, we've studied this is what the data points you need to invest in. And so it's really a strategy grant.
So is 500 grand just for the study, or do we projects done within that 500?
So the 500 will be a study. It will be a study, but it's going to be an all-encompassing study. Some of these things, it's hard to point out what the right dollar amount is, but you're limited at times if you invest, just throw out a number, 50,000 or 100,000 in a corridor study. It limits the scope of what a consultant is going to say is financially feasible for them to do. Then you have to start trimming items off, and you don't really get what you ask for. 500,000 is a lofty number. I'll give you that. But what they will know if they are successful is nothing's going to be left out of this. So it's going to be a roadmap towards going after project funding, which they can go right back to the EDA and apply for. Sir.
So the Belmont corridor runs from downtown, how far up?
Justin, you know where
Is it
they're
up to Giant Eagle or?
I know that's been a lot of the focus of that group. I'm not is involved in this specific project, but over the past year, this group has been meeting probably even longer than that. And kind of that downtown to Giant Eagle has been the main focus area.
When you say downtown, is it starting at Federal Street?
Street.
Very corridor focused. So.
And there was even some conversation at some points of looking all the way out to the airport. Because you could take it that far. So depending on kind of where the scope of work fell out for this specific application.
And I will say, I mean, that, like Justin said, that group's been meeting for quite a while. They had a lot of pieces in place already to put a grant application together. This particular opportunity came across their desk a few weeks ago, and they mobilized very quickly, and I believe they submitted yesterday, so they got it in about a day before the deadline. I took a look at it. It has a chance to be as competitive as anything I've seen on an EDA basis, but with these, this is a national challenge. There's not as many grants given out, and you're competing against folks across the country. So what I'm going to talk about next, the EDA Public Works and Adjustment Assistance Program. This program, we're only competing against folks in a 6-state region. So the Chicago region, I believe it's obviously Illinois, Wisconsin, Ohio, I want to say Pennsylvania, Minnesota. There's another one in there I'm forgetting, but for our purpose, I mean, obviously we just focus on our region. But so this is the most prescribed program for EDA funding, particularly what we deal with here at Eastgate. All of the projects we mentioned on the previous slides, projects funded in the past have typically come out of this program. It's the most pliable, it's the most nimble. You can apply for construction funding. You can apply for planning grants. It's really kind of whatever you want to go after, as long as it has an economic twist to it. It's got to be job creation related, economic development, obviously. This time around, starting at FY24, which just began a few days ago on October 1st, the program's going to have about $300 million. They do require a 50% match. It could be cash, in kind. We typically recommend to communities we're working with on these to, if they can, match the project with cash. It just makes it much more competitive from an EDA review standpoint. When you match with in kind, there's a lot more red tape involved in that. They have to go through and see what you're trying to offer, whether it's staff time, administrative time, building assets. It becomes very convoluted. If you could just write a check with cash, your project would be much more competitive. So that's what we tell a lot of our communities, and they've been going that route. And I believe the last 9 applications have been funded. So we're kind of on a little bit of a hot streak as a region for EDA funding. But what we typically tell folks, if they're going to go after construction funding, that ceiling somewhere around 2 million, give or take a couple $100,000. The most we've seen actually was the Golden Triangle that got funded a couple of years ago. They got about 2.6 million, which was the highest in my roughly 4.5, 5 years here that I've seen. For planning grants, the most I've seen is about 200,000 just in this program. So those are kind of the floor and the ceiling of the funding you want to go after. The projects are accepted on a rolling basis. There's no deadlines. The deadline's when the funding for the fiscal year runs out. So that typically happens pretty quickly because as soon as the new fiscal year starts, applications start rolling in from all over. So when they have a little bit of remaining funding towards the tail end of a fiscal year, they may call us up and say, hey, we have 100,000 left. Do you have a project somewhere? And we'll try to identify one. But some things to remember, it's highly competitive. Again, you got to have the economic impacts. Don't be greedy. You know, if you have a number in mind that you know you can accomplish your task with, only ask for what you need. And then it has to align with their priorities, which are on the next slide here. So equity, recovery and resilience, workforce development, manufacturing, technology-based development, environmentally sustainable development, and then exports and foreign direct investment. So project has to align with at least one of those principles, and then you'd be on the right track. I believe the last piece here for economic development before we drive into broadband. Eastgate, myself, we attended the 2023 Ohio Economic Development Association Annual Summit. A lot of those priorities look very similar to the previous screen. Ohio's trying to really align themselves with what's happening at the federal level with a few different things. They're looking at the tax structure. They're really focused on energy, affordable and reliable energy. They're focused on infrastructure, which is a key issue in the state. And then existing businesses. Too often we talk about how do we bring in new business, but oftentimes what gets lost is how do we support the businesses that are here, right? How can we encourage them to grow and really work on things that will help them sustain their operations long into the future.
What's an example of a simple and equitable tax structure?
So the folks down there, was a lot of roundtables and different split out groups. It was a 3-day summit, but they're trying to simplify the tax code so that it's not so complicated for businesses when they're coming into the state.
At the state level.
At the state level. And a lot of that comes from Jobs Ohio and the work they've done. And they have the ear of the governor, but Ohio's on a roll in terms of economic activity. I believe last year we were 3rd in the nation in new private investment, which is saying something considering what you're looking at in, states like Texas or Florida or California, Pennsylvania, states that really are economic drivers for the nation. And Ohio was number 3. A lot of that had to do with the Intel chip plant going into New Albany. I always want to just say Columbus, but New Albany. And obviously the Altium cells, a lot of the electric vehicle battery stuff going in around the state. But Ohio's really geared up to continue to sustain this economic surge that we've had the last few years post COVID, post at least the main COVID-19 pandemic. But what they're talking about in tax code is working on ways to continue to encourage further investment. So, you don't want to give everyone tax breaks, but how do you work with them in a process that's fair and equitable for not only the communities, but also the business, for them to choose Ohio versus PA or Indiana or Kentucky, Tennessee, any of our neighboring counterparts. On the right, myself, along with folks from the Youngstown Warren Regional Chamber and the National Center for Urban Solutions, participated in the OEDA's Certified Economic Developer Program. We passed and were awarded that credential back in May, and at this conference, they awarded us our official plaques there that I have hanging on my wall in my office. So it was a good experience, learned a lot, and I hope I can apply some of those skills to the work we do here. So. Okay, moving into broadband, this has really emerged, and I know we touched on this when Steve and I were here in July. I can't believe time's gone by that fast, but we've been rolling right along. I'll update you on a few things we talked about then, but there's a lot of new opportunities that have emerged as well. So recently, Eastgate received a $45,000 grant from Connect Humanity. Connect Humanity is an organization focused on Appalachia. So Eastgate's territory being in the Appalachian Regional Commission footprint, we were applicable to receive this funding. Essentially what they want us to do is they want us to take our broadband feasibility study that we completed 2 years ago and basically spin off from that and align it with the BEAD funding that is coming in 24 and 25 to the state of Ohio. The state's going to get $793 million in broadband equity access and deployment funding, which is going to target, and we'll show some maps here in a minute, unserved and underserved communities that lack adequate broadband speed. You'll see on the maps in a moment what I'm talking about, but this funding will allow us to work closely with Ashtabula, Trumbull, and Mahoning to each create their own digital equity plans. And those plans will align exactly with what the state is offering in terms of BEAD funding. So we wanted them to capture their fair share of that $793 million, once in a lifetime opportunity. And so this project will get underway here soon, and we hope to have those plans ready by early summer, potentially later in the early fall 2024. And so just again, touched on this before. I should have edited this PowerPoint from earlier, but that's 2.75 million on the right, not billion. If we were getting 2.75 billion, I think we could all go home, rest assured that broadband will be running through our veins in the state of Ohio. But yeah, 2.75 million there, and then 793 million on the left. The money on the left is going to be project related, last mile residential, and then obviously to areas of the state that really lack any sort of modern internet access. Digital equity program will be helping to assist with training, getting devices out to folks, and then hopefully trying to alleviate some of the burden of the costly internet bills. And obviously everything continues to go up. So that's looking at ways in which we can make everything equitable. So here again is the timeline. 20% of the funding to be released in 2024, the remaining 80% in 2025. So it aligns really well with the funding we got from Connect Humanity to put those plans together. We want to be able to just hand that over to Broadband Ohio and say, here's the 5-10 projects we want you to look at in each county. And here's our menu. We put these plans together. And so we should put our best foot forward for this funding. 4-year implementation period. I believe the funding has got to be spent from BEAD by 2027, 2028. So, I mean, we're looking out there a little bit, but when you put a fiber project together, for example, from, basically development to issuing an RFP and getting a provider under contract, you could be looking at 36 months before a fiber build is completed. So you look at 25, you figure by the time a project could be completed, it'd be 27 or 28. So really kind of moves slower than you'd like, but this is the process we're dealing with. And as I mentioned, the funding will first go to the unserved, anyone who lacks 25 megabit download speed and 3 megabit upload speed. Those areas and communities will be targeted first with the funding, and then the second priority will be looking at communities under the 100 megabit download, 20 upload speed. So that's where the two initial pots of funding will go to. And then they're also going to be looking at and emphasizing anchor institutions such as schools, hospitals, government facilities, universities, and then training, devices, workforce development, another key piece where a lot of that funding will go to. Organizations such as the Oak Hill Collaborative, for example, will be beneficiaries of a lot of that funding as well. So here's a big piece. We talked about this earlier, and I think it turned a lot of heads, as much as you could turn them at a TAC meeting on a Thursday at 10 a.m. But so there's going to be a challenge process. Again, we have a lot of areas in our state where the FCC considers them served. So that means they would be ineligible for any of the funding we just talked about. What the state's doing right now, as you see in the second bubble, they're going to publish their own list of eligible locations, and they're going to challenge what the FCC is showing on their maps. And I'm going to show a map here in a minute, which will kind of highlight the importance of why this process will be critical. We want to make sure that any location that's shown as served on an FCC map, whether it's in Youngstown, Warren, Girard, Liberty, Niles, anywhere you live, that we challenge that and say, I can't get that service here. I'm not getting 100 megabit download speed here, or I'm not getting even 25 in my location. Because providers, what they like to do is they like to oversell what they're capable of to the FCC when they put their maps out, so that other providers don't come into their territory. So it's almost a territorial thing. The problem is there's no real punitive action from the FCC that stops them from doing that. All that happens is the location gets challenged by Greg. I keep picking on you, but location gets challenged by Greg Greathouse. And if the provider really can't deliver service there, then it gets removed from the map. But they don't remove all of those locations. They go location by location. It's very, it's an outdated system. It's very inaccurate. But the FCC says if it's shown as served, we won't fund it. So the challenge process is going to be critical. There'll be more information on it from the state here soon. But I would keep your eyes and ears peeled from an announcement from us. Anything you can do to verify that what your provider is telling you you're getting You can verify that either through a speed test or call myself or Steve Christian will help you walk you through the process, but we want to make sure we have an accurate depiction. So on this map, a lot of you, hopefully you can see, but Trumbull County is shown as completely served. And we know that to be very much completely false. So the map I'm going to show on the next screen will show you that the top half of Trumbull County, basically starting as you get outside of Warren, and then sort of on the outskirts here will be unserved, underserved, to say the least. But somehow the FCC on this map is showing it as completely served. And what that means for Trumbull County is they're not going to get a dime of the 793 million that's out there for project funding. So it's not good. So it's going to be really incumbent upon Eastgate, the communities we serve, to make sure that we get all those challenges in, however the process rolls out, and make sure that once we have that opportunity, that we prove to them that the map looks more like this. This is the actual map based on the ground testing, verification by a myriad of sources, a myriad of abilities to download, whether it's cellular, at-home internet, Wi-Fi, fiber. It was all done by a third party, paid for and tested by Broadband Ohio. And these are the maps that we believe to be just about as accurate as can be. And as you see, a lot of the middle to northern part of Trumbull is orange and red. Even the yellow color is really not sufficient at this point, based upon the information we've shared with you tonight. And then you look at Ashtabula, they're really in a bad spot. Mahoning's probably the most well off right now, but we do have a project that I'll touch on again that will help to kind of work on these outskirt rural townships and really hope to kind of bring them up out of that orange underserved designation. So here we go, Connect Mahoning. We touched on this at our July meeting, but we've moved this project along. Again, it was a $1.5 million ARPA investment from the Board of Mahoning County Commissioners. Essentially, what they wanted us to do is they wanted us to develop and then oversee a strategic wireless deployment in the rural townships of the county. Those rural townships are the only ones, as you saw on the previous map, that are either unserved or underserved according to the data we're working with. That doesn't mean that there's not issues with affordability or access to devices in other parts of the county, but these are the areas where they're lacking modern connectivity. So it's Springfield, Goshen, Smith, Jackson, and Milton. And this map right here is a rendering from the provider that we're pretty close to getting under contract that they provided to us. And they said, we put towers, a tower in Springfield and a tower in Goshen, and then utilize already existing assets in Jackson Township. This is what they feel like with putting equipment on towers that they can offer. And as you see, it's pretty deep green. They're saying anywhere from 200 megabit download speeds and faster. So they would bring them right up into, with the whole entire purpose of what BEAD is trying to accomplish. But this would be done locally by the Board of Mahoning County Commissioners. So we be using local funds. Just another project. We also touched on this in July, but this is very close to receiving an announcement. This is the Connecting Underserved Appalachia. Ashtabula County, along with Eastgate and the Governor's Office of Appalachia, submitted a $2.5 million request to the Appalachian Regional Commission's Power Program. We were able to identify a provider to put an application in with us. That provider came to the table with a $10 million match. So as you see, that total project cost between the grant allocation and the provider match, $12.5 million. We are pretty confident this project's going to get funded, but an announcement, a formal announcement will be expected by ARC probably next week, the week after, but some point this month. Very confident. And then just some last things to touch on. I think this is it. Just some ongoing broadband initiatives, projects that are either nearing completion or ones that we've already kind of completed, moved on to the next phase. But the Trumbull broadband engineering analysis, we got further funding from ARC to complete preliminary engineering for a fiber loop running through Niles, Warren, Howland, and Weathersfield. It's not billed as a residential solution. There's pretty good connectivity in those communities, but this is more business oriented. So we're trying to identify industrial corridors or business centric corridors to run this fiber loop through and really utilize that as an economic driver. I know that the consultant handling this contract has actually gone into the Golden Triangle and talked to businesses directly about what their needs are. And so we're confident that this project can give us a nice blueprint and a playbook to run a redundant fiber loop through these communities and really help to enable the businesses to be further productive and utilize the internet for their processes. The wireless deployment project, similar to what I just showed you in Mahoning County, we started this pilot project in Ashtabula County. About 4 towers were constructed. They formed a partnership with Ohio Transparent Telecom, who's put equipment onto those towers. They're currently testing the service in the townships of Lenox, New Lyme, Cherry Valley, Richmond, and Pierpont. And actually, I believe it's going live in Cherry Valley this week. So we will have a really good test case to use up in Ashtabula to see what we can expect in Mahoning when our project down there gets underway. I touched on this, but we continue to stress the importance of the Affordable Connectivity Plan. It's a FCC program that offers little or no cost internet to folks that qualify. Essentially, it's a $30 per month stipend to take off your internet bill. There's certainly income requirements to qualify for the funding, but just in Youngstown alone, like 10,000 homes have taken advantage of this program. The number's been enormous in the state of Ohio. There's more folks in the state of Ohio prescribed to this plan than anywhere else in the country. So not sure if that's a good indicator of income level in the state overall or not, but what we are doing is we're getting internet out to folks, which allows them to work remotely, attend school remotely, access telemedicine, all of the modern conveniences that we really take for granted today. But the issue with ACP is that if we don't have further federal action, the program will sunset sometime in early to mid 2024 with not really a plan in place to continue to keep those folks connected without those stipends. Just a couple other items. The dig once policy, really a common sense policy. We talked to a lot of the engineers at the county level and local city level. When you have major roadway construction, roadway widening, rebuilding of roads, when everything's dug up, we might as well run conduit up and down those roads, right? So when a provider comes in and they want to, further deploy their broadband assets in your community, they're not digging up the roads that you just completed, right? We've seen that happen down here in Youngstown, I think at least twice since various roads have already been, put back together. I think it happened on Commerce Street a couple of times, but it's sort of common sense. It's more of a recommendation from us to our communities, but the more data we see from this, it's one of the easiest things a community can do, almost no cost, to have a dig once policy where you alert the providers, let's say 12 months in advance before a major roadway project and say, we're going to have this road open. Come and put your assets in the ground now so we're not redigging the road up again 6 months after we complete it or a year or what have you. So sort of common sense. We're talking again to a lot of our county level engineers who are very much on board with the policy. And then lastly, our big project, the State Route 11 Lake to River fiber line. Unfortunately, we didn't get funding from the NTIA's Middle Mile program, but we're confident working and talking with our state and federal legislators, ODOT, Broadband Ohio, that we're going to find some funding, whether it's in BEAD, as we talked about, the $793 million, or through various other state and federal sources. But that project is shovel ready. We have, I got an engineering plan on my desk. So we're ready to go. We just have to capture the funding, which is By the time we get it, maybe about 25 million to complete the entire 101-mile fiber line. The benefits of that line are it significantly reduces last mile cost providers to build out into the communities out, as you veer off of Route 11. And then it serves as a wholesale and redundant line. It provides connectivity to existing fiber lines that run east-west from New York to Chicago. So it's actually a home run project. The state's on board, just struck out on our initial attempt to get funding. So that was a lot. But it's my first time giving a big update in a while, so it was a lot of stuff I needed to cover. Happy to take any questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
Once you put these fibers in, or you put these towers up, how do you decide who the internet service provider is going to be?
So
Is it going to be Warner Cable or Armstrong or some other special?
So typically, when we're given the opportunity to control that narrative, we like it to be open source. And open source means that everybody has an opportunity to put their equipment on that tower, and or they will have our fiber line we just talked about. That's going to be open source. So we're going to run a 400. If you're not familiar with broadband, just stop me. But we're going to run a 432 count broadband fiber strand, which is enormous. That's going to be the size of the line running from Lake Erie to the Ohio River. Countless providers will be able to get into there and utilize that. So
Are they going to pay a fee to use?
yes, yeah, absolutely. So there's going to be a public-private partnership set up. There's going to be user fees, like for us to use the state's right of way. That's how we had to form that agreement first. The state's allowing us into that right of way just by offering them 2 pairs of fiber, which is 24 strands. They want fiber along the median on Route 11 for their intelligent transportation systems devices. So that's variable speed signs, the cameras, a lot of other stuff they put along their roadway assets. But they let us in there just for allowing them strands of fiber. Typically, to get in there right away, you have to pay them a fee, right? You have to pay them a fee every year, whether it's a certain percentage of the value of the line, a certain percentage of the proceeds that come from charging the providers to get in there. We will work through those details in a more minute manner once we get the funding to build the line, but everybody will have access to get it. It's going to be open access.
Who's going to be responsible for the maintenance of these lines?
So the responsibility of the maintenance will lie with the provider. Yeah. So we're building the line. We're going to provide, hopefully from maybe a state federal package of funds. We're going to construct the line. So we're going to take away, as I said, 25 million of upfront costs that a provider would typically be responsible for, and then sort of form partnerships and say, we got communities along Route 11 in Trumbull, Mahoning, Asheville County that need service. We need you to build out to this XYZ township or XYZ community. It's sort of a win-win for both sides.
Is this fiber line going to run down the median of Route 11?
Yeah, for a majority of the time, roughly 85% of the route, it'll be down the median. Yes.
Is there going to be any traffic disruption during the construction?
I don't think so, because what they utilize, maybe temporarily at times, but not like serious disruptions. Just when they're getting their staging their equipment out there. But what they use is oh God, I'm losing the term. They pull. There's a machine. I wish I had a picture of it. It's a machine that pulls the cable. It plows it. There's a plowing machine that will drive. It's almost like a big tractor, and they just drive it. It plows the fiber and the conduit into the ground along the route. So that piece of equipment will be in the median in the grass there, just kind of cruising at a very slow speed, plowing the fiber and conduit into the ground. For if you've ever driven Route 11 from Trumbull County to the lake, it's pretty straight route, where they will have to maybe fix some equipment to the parapets of the bridges and on kind of veer off a little bit as they kind of get into parts of Mahoning County. Columbiana County is kind of a zigzag down Route 11. So the plan that we have, it's on our website. If you're interested, it's very detailed engineering. But they'll do some different innovative things as they get further south. But for 85-90% of the route, it'll be all in the center median.
A quick question about the airport, which
Sure,
you
yeah.
talked about at the beginning. of your
Yeah.
talk. Of course, airlines have been consolidating now into major markets, and they've been discontinuing service in smaller markets
Sure.
so they can operate more efficiently and have fuller planes, make more money.
Yeah.
Has the Port Authority given up on the idea of restoring commercial aviation to the Youngstown Warren Regional Airport?
No, simultaneously, while this study's going on, they also had a previously funded, it's called a catchment study. And essentially, they had an organization come in and they took a look at the entire Mahoning Valley. And they basically were able to pin where are folks flying out of and how likely would they be to come back and fly out of Youngstown. And obviously, a majority of the people were split, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. But there was a smaller percentage that went to Akron, Canton. There was another chunk of folks, the fourth largest percentage went to Detroit to fly, about 3 hours away. And then there was a smaller percentage that would drive all the way down to Columbus as well to fly. That study should be available. That should be complete. I wish Kevin was here tonight because Kevin Kern would be very familiar with that. I attended a meeting at one point and it was very interesting how they talked about it. I don't know if I can answer the question of will they come back, but they're trying to do everything they can to at least make it more attractive for a small airline to come in. What the catchment study has shown is that a company like Allegiant, their flights were full out of Youngstown. So they didn't leave because they didn't have riders. They left because their return on investment is based on folks going on their website and ordering not only the flight, but booking their hotel and their rental car, the whole package through them. That's how they get their most bang for their buck. And if they don't see a lot of prescription of that whole package, it's harder for them to make money. I don't know what their model's based on. If you have full planes, you think you'd be making money, but Allegiant's process is they want the whole bundle package. If they could get you to book the hotel, the car, and the flight, that's where they're more willing to stay in the smaller markets.
I guess any airline coming in is going to want a revenue guarantee, which probably has to come from public money, right?
So I'm not equipped to answer that question. I would refer you to Kevin, who's also on your committee. I would talk to Kevin about it. He's been obviously an advocate of everything the port does, but that catchment study is probably done. They probably have that completed down there somewhere. So, if we can get a hold of that, we'll try to share that study with you, or maybe give Kevin a holler, and I'm sure he has further information on that. I don't want to talk out of turn for that project. I know enough to be dangerous. We helped them get the funding to fund the study, but as far as the financials of what's next, I don't want to just pull something out of left field. Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. So I'll cover the next two topics here. General Policy Board. So Eastgate canceled its last General Policy Board meeting. We had some scheduling conflicts, and unfortunately, our executive director had a death in his family. So to avoid kind of any challenges with scheduling and content, things like that, we did cancel that General Policy Board meeting, which overall, not a terrible thing. There wasn't a whole lot of activity in the last quarter to go through that board. So nothing really got missed. We are moving kind of all of the content to the next meeting, which will take place Monday, December 4th at 10 a.m. So just something to keep on your radar if you think there's something important for the CAB to address that board. I'd be happy to include that in the CAB report for December's meeting. And then moving on to our Technical Advisory Committee meeting summary. I'll talk through some of the topics that our staff talked about at our meeting earlier today. But luckily, the first one up, we have Joey here to talk about the fiscal year 2023 obligation report. So he'll explain what all that means.
Yeah, thanks, John. Sounds fancy. When you think about it, It's not that fancy. All it is a listing of projects that are using federal funds that we have to submit. So you can see the majority of the projects that were funded in the two counties were road operation and maintenance, which that's just going to be basic, road operation. It's bridge repairs, resurfacings. We had some bike ped projects, some transit through WRTA and planning projects. We had absolutely no roadway capacity. So the prime example of a roadway capacity project is adding a turning lane or adding a single lane to a highway. For Trumbull County, obviously the biggest project is the Diverging Diamond in Howland. That was about $20.4 million. And as you all know, it's begun. They just began construction. Other than that, the only outlier in this group is the bike ped for State Route 5 in Kinsman. And that was funded through the Trumbull County engineers, and it was only $200,000. So for Mahoning County, we had quite a bit less in funding. Biggest projects were bridge painting for the entire county. State Route 170, that's just roadway rehabilitation, and some WRTA projects. So the biggest one being solar canopy at the facilities. And that was all pretty much it for the two counties. SVG and TAP applications are due in December. That's doesn't really pertain.
Actually, a tie-in that I think a lot of residents don't recognize that they can have is if you've got city councilors or township trustees and you have a project in mind that may be able to be funded through these. So these programs fund roadways that are on the federal aid system. So we've got a map on our website that is all the federal aid routes in two counties, Mahoning and Trumbull counties. Any of those roads are eligible to access funding through these programs. So if there's a project you have in mind, I implore you to engage with, your local elected official and make sure that they know about it and make sure they know about this funding source because that's how a lot of these projects start. It's just conversations with city council people, township trustees, and getting these things to happen. So yeah, you can feel free to play around with this map and see if there's any roads you know about that there's a project in mind. Anything Joey was talking about, whether that's just regular resurfacing to maybe of a place that needs a turning lane. If you see a backup in traffic and there's congestion, or maybe you want bike lanes on a certain road. Sky's the limit, really.
Yep, and bike lanes are very good for our TAP program because it is getting you from point A to point B without using a vehicle.
The solar canopies at WRTA, where are they and what do they do? Are they just canopies that people wait for buses under and then they have solar panels on top or what?
I'm not quite sure. I could refer you to Murda. She does a lot with our WRTA people. She would know a lot more about that. So if you'd like her information, go ahead and come to me after the meeting. Okay.
What about, continuing with WRTA, what about just having benches on the routes? Is that covered by any of that? Could be covered by any?
I'm not quite sure. It definitely won't be under the SCBG program. For TAP, maybe, because it does have to do with transportation alternatives. But at the same time, it's usually on existing infrastructure, so like roadways.
Okay.
So like the best example are the bike lanes, the walkways, sidewalks.
I mean, the bench would be on the sidewalk, Devil Strip or whatever.
Yeah, I'm
Of a
not
roadway.
quite sure.
Street amenities and furniture is kind of a tricky thing when it comes to these federal funding sources. They're very particular about what's eligible, even like certain types of lighting fixtures. They're very picky about which actually gets installed or is eligible for funding. I do know that WRTA has local funding sources for bus stops and shelters and benches and things like that. And they routinely utilize their data that they get for passengers getting on and off buses to identify priority areas for installing that infrastructure. And then on the solar canopy project, if I remember correctly, and this is maybe about 70%, I believe that's at their bus garage facility that they're making upgrades and installing solar panels. But I will confirm with Myrna, like Joey said, make sure that's included.
Question about the bridge preservation project you have listed here. A number of years ago, we were told that the Mahoning County had a bond issue passed for bridge maintenance. Has that expired? Is that no longer in effect?
I'm not sure. Justin, do you know that?
Yeah, I'm not sure of that one.
I think it may have been depleted. That was a long, long time ago.
It was quite a while ago, yes. So that's no longer a source of funding then, is that right?
I would assume not.
If it would be, it'd be from the county directly, so that wouldn't necessarily funnel through our agency. I can reach out to Pat Giannini and see if I can get
Okay.
an answer. That was Mahoning County.
Mahoning County. At one time, it was presented to us as one of the reasons why Mahoning County bridges were in such good conditions because the bond issue had been passed. There's money available.
Any other questions about the obligation report? Well, I'll run through the remainder of these technical advisory committee updates. So up next, Myrta provided an update on transit service and funding updates. As you may be aware, WRTA was running fixed route service in Warren and Trumbull County. That was running and operating through a state grant called the OTP2 grant program, which was a 1-year period grant. The WRTA had to apply to the state, and that project was to operate those fixed route services. So that was in March of 2020 when they first were awarded. They went back to the state this most recent round, applied to continue those routes, and the state said no. So those routes, unfortunately, are being discontinued. The only Trumbull County route remaining will be the Warren Express route because that has a separate dedicated source of funding. But the state came back and gave reasoning for declining that project. And they identified the fact that there was no dedicated local funding source from Trumbull County to match those funds. So they wanted to see something more sustainable. It wasn't just totally funded and operated by the state. They wanted to see local buy-in to make that happen and continue on a more sustainable basis. So that's the reason that kind of is taking a step back. So our transit staff, Myrna Reyes-Chapman, has been working with Trumbull County commissioners to figure out what the next step is. How can we come to a resolution and figure out what the right solution is to provide reliable transit service? And what are the funding options? I know a sales tax has been on the table and that's been discussed numerous different ways. So we're taking a look at all the options and really want to take it to them to help them make the best decision possible to provide quality service. So some bad news there, but hopefully we can come to a good resolution and find a way to get those routes back up and running. Up next on the agenda was the planning grant. So some of you may be familiar with this. This is a program that we've run 3 other rounds. We run it every other year. We take $30,000 of the planning funding that we receive. So that allows us to do our planning work right off the top, and we set that aside to be able to grant out to local communities to conduct their own transportation plans. Recognizing that a lot of local communities don't have planners on staff, don't necessarily have the capacity to do this kind of work on their own. So we want to make it a little bit easier. So being able to free up some money for them to bring on a consultant and do some small scale transportation planning projects. The planning grants are intended to be very small scale projects. Look at a corridor, look at a main street, look at a neighborhood, and figure out how do we improve access. So that could be access from where people live to where they recreate, where they get groceries. We prioritize active transportation and other types of modes other than just making it easier to drive a car through that program. But we'll be spinning that program back up, and Tricia Diavignon, who was a former CAB member and is now on the staff of Eastgate, it's just about her 1-year anniversary here. We'll be taking that program over and leading that effort. But applications for that program will open up on October 20th, and those applications will be due December 18th. Another thing that you can communicate with your elected officials about, if you want to see a project happen, let them know that this opportunity exists. There is a 10% cash match requirement. So a lot of these projects end up being about $10,000 to $15,000. 10% of that, $1,000. Not so hard for a small community to find a way to make that work. So a low burden financially on the communities to be able to potentially get a good transportation planning project. After that, Clean Ohio Round 18 discussion, Stephanie Dyer gave a summary of the 2 project applications that were received. The first one is the Mill Creek Metro Parks Wildlife Sanctuary Expansion Improvement. That'll increase public access and recreation opportunities. This wildlife sanctuary is a piece of property that was purchased with Clean Ohio funds 4 or so years ago, and they're coming back to that program to be able to get more funding to make improvements to the land that they acquired and preserved. Second project is the Champion Wetland Connector, and that project would acquire 117 acres of Category 3 wetlands, which is the highest quality wetland categorization. And it would also protect 3 streams and restore 63 acres of agricultural field as a prairie pollinator habitat. So 2 great projects. Unfortunately, because there were only 2 projects this round, that leaves a lot of money on the table. Good news is we don't lose that funding. That rolls over into the next round. So next year when we come up for Clean Ohio Round 19, there will be a considerable amount of money available to not only acquire and preserve land, but also do projects like stream restoration or revisit projects that were funded in the past and make improvements to them.
Now, let me ask you, Justin, quickly here, McKelvey Lake. Yep. I see a lot of potential there. You know, I guess it's going to be a city park, but I can see it even as a state park, possible the Lake Milton State Park. Maybe this is beyond the city's capacity. I don't know, but I mean, as far as planning it and operating and maintaining it, or building it out, can we use Clean Ohio grant money for park-related improvements at McKelvey Lake, like a boat launch and a parking lot at the boat launch, and maybe a hiking trail around the perimeter of the lake? Can Clean Ohio money be used for that?
I believe so. I think there are some limitations in terms of parking lot might not be an eligible use. They really prioritize preservation of through this funding source. So adding impervious surfaces is sometimes a tricky one to be able to sell. But I do believe hiking trails are an okay and eligible expense. So yeah. And I want to say McKelvey Lake is a previous Clean Ohio project. I think there were previously funds from Clean Ohio to do some work at McKelvey Lake, but I'd have to double check with Stephanie on this.
Well, I think they should get moving on this. I mean, the summer recreation season is over in the city parks. Now they need to get busy with planning. They got to have a public meeting on the east side of Youngstown to see what the people want. I mean, what kind of a facility they want out there? Do they want unlimited horsepower, 10 or 20 horsepower limit, electric motors only on the boats? What is the public's vision for this? Let's get a hearing going on the east side soon. And then let's get the ball rolling here. I mean, they're just sitting there. And of course, now they have a golden opportunity to do some improvements because the lake level is down for dam repair. And have access to shoreline areas, which they won't when the lake gets filled up. So I wish they would get moving on this somehow and, and not worry about who controls what, let's just get things moving.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm trying to be politically correct here.
You did a great job.
Okay.
Then Mark gave an update on economic development and broadband. Obviously, you all heard what he had to say, and I think you got it in much more depth than he provided to the TAC earlier today. And lastly, Ed Davis gave some information on the OPWC program, which is the Ohio Public Works Commission. That is the old issue 2 public infrastructure funding that was voted on by the voters 38 years ago. So this is round 38. There's about 58 projects submitted for both grant and loan funding through that program. I will include the spreadsheet of the projects that he sent me with the meeting follow-up. So if you're interested in what projects get funneled through that program, that information will be attached to the meeting summary. You could dig in. Any questions, feel free to send my way. Sure, to get those over to them for But that is everything we covered at TAC. Our executive director, Jim Kinnick, also made a few comments at the end of the meeting about some larger efforts that we've undertaken recently. We brought a consultant on board to do a 2-county regional housing strategy, which would involve a market value assessment as well as developing policy and infrastructure recommendations on housing in Mahoning and Trumbull counties. So that project is really just starting. We're going to have a kickoff meeting in about a month. We're still kind of finalizing some of the details in terms of where that'll take place, time and date. But when that information is secured, I'll make sure to make this group aware that that's occurring, because I think that project could turn into something really great and give our communities a good solid foundation of how to address the housing issues that we're facing. We submitted a project that I presented on last month or the month before, no, not last month, a few months ago, called Madison Avenue Community Reconnection. So that program is the Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods program through USDOT. We submitted our application last week. So fingers crossed that we'll be successful this year. We were razor close last year. So we feel good about that one and confident that we'll be able to bring that funding to the valley to plan that project. We now have a consultant on board for our Safe Streets and Roads for All project, which is another planning project, Mahoning and Trumbull counties, where we will take our current regional safety plan and basically level it up. We're going to focus heavily on equity, as that's a driving factor of the people that are most affected by roadway safety incidents. And there will be a ton of public engagement. In fact, Grant will be at the CAB next month and running kind of a initial public engagement meeting for that. So that's going to be at the very start of that project. So should be a fun meeting next month with that. And lastly, the Appalachian Community Grant Program, which is always a topic of interest because it's $500 million that's floating out there for 32 counties in Ohio. So we have a great opportunity to bring home north of $100 million for projects across the region. So we're working with all of our local communities to figure out what projects will be most eligible for the funding criteria that program is focused around, which is healthcare, workforce development, and downtown revitalization. But because the funding source is also ARPA, we have to address COVID and the pandemic impact through those projects as well. So Eastgate will be taking the lead and submitting a lead application by the end of this year, culminating all of our region's projects into one application so that we look like we're marching all to the same beat of the drum. We'll be successful together. So that kind of wraps up our technical advisory committee. Any questions about any of those before we move on to the next topic? The next one, pretty important. We are at the end of this year already. So next year we'll have to figure out who wants to be members of the CAB. So we have our board membership application open. I know a handful of people have already submitted their applications, so you're all good. If you want to be a board member next year, just click on that apply here button that's in the emails or in the agendas and meeting summaries. Fill out your information. If you're a member this year, I think it's like 4 questions you want to fill out. One of those is your name, so pretty easy. Tried to make it as simple as possible and painless as possible. But I do want to say, what is being a member of the CAB? Sometimes that can get a little lost in translation. Like, what is the CAB? What do we do? And essentially, the biggest point that I think and the most important thing is that you get direct voting power on the actions of our agency. So the CAB gets 2 seats on our general policy board. Those representatives get to take your voice to the voting body of Eastgate and make decisions. So that's every resolution, that's every action that our agency takes. The citizens have 2 votes to make that happen. So every community just gets 1. So the citizens we've given and entrusted to. So I think that's a really big thing to underscore and just how important it is that we've run kind of this committee in this way. The other thing is that you get to influence how we do our work. So a lot of times, comments that you make in these meetings, we're taking not only back to the work that we're doing at our desks, but we're taking it to our community members, people we work with. That's county engineers and mayors and planners, those folks to let them know what we're seeing and hearing from you all. So really, it's a position of influence that I think you don't necessarily get in many other contexts of government. So I'm happy that we are able to provide that. Any way that we can make improvements to that, always happy to hear. But I think it's important to just kind of lay that out of what you get for sharing your time and volunteering your energy and listening to me talk almost once a month.
But also, I think, gives us the opportunity to find out, how things operate, and we become ambassadors back to our constituents, because they have, a lot of them don't even know what you do here. They don't know about projects. And I know with some of our neighborhood meetings, things come up and I says, wow, you guys had already talked about that, but they had no knowledge of it.
Yes.
So that's why I said I think we're also ambassadors.
And that goes for anyone that's involved. If you ever want us to come to your meetings, let us know. We're more than happy to go to you to share this information too, because it's a lot to ask people to come here at this time, 8 times a year. That's a considerable lift for a lot of people. So if we can go out and get to where people are already gathering and conversing, we're happy to do that as well.
Like a block watcher, a neighborhood association, something like that. You would be willing to be a speaker at something.
Certainly.
One thing that really stuck out with me, I changed wards and went to the 6th ward was in Lothian Boulevard, and the neighbors were upset about the construction. Basically, I says, that ship left the dock a couple of years ago. I don't think you're gonna be able to change anything. The money has been allocated, and guess what? They're gonna start construction in less than a month.
And that, comes down to the philosophy of public engagement. And I will be kind to our partners at the State Department of Transportation.
No.
A lot of times, I think there are decisions that are made and then it is brought to the public to tell them what the decisions are, rather than having the public there at the very start and saying, hey, let's do this together. How should we proceed? And you get a gentler process if you start bringing people in earlier. So that's.
I know a lot of people in the 7th ward, which is where I live, are very upset about some of the changes. You're in the 6th.
6th ward, yeah.
Yeah, could have had some public input. Especially, there's a lot of older people in the neighborhood, and eliminating some of the stop signs or the, I should say, traffic lights, because they tend to be more cautious when they're driving. And Now you can't pull out like you used to be able to, stuff like that.
We did that in Warren 2.5 years ago. And there's a couple of wards that they're still fist fighting over. Traffic lights, thinking that they're gonna bring them back by citizen petition. I go, it's not happening. It's the state makes those decisions and, you're talking to the wrong people. You need to go to Columbus.
Yeah, but I mean, Justin's point is that they make this without citizen input. And if they had taken the time up front with citizen input, they would have heard some of these concerns that are safety and worrisome and important input.
We had citizen input. The state said, oh, here's the uniform, what is it? Uniform code of,
MUTCD.
Thank you.
Manual for Uniform Traffic Control.
thank you. And you've got to adhere to it. We'll do a study to tell you what needs to be done, but part of us paying for the study is you also agree to be bound by the manual. So we signed on the bottom line, they did the study and they said, in order to be in compliance with state law, you've got to take them out here, you're going to change this. And I mean, it was like a third of the four-way stop sign, the intersections in the city were removed and maybe a fifth of the traffic signals were taken down. Oh my God, it was, you thought we'd come for their firstborn child. It was horrible.
But when your population declines, you probably have less traffic, and that means
There's no reasonable expectation that you just don't have, we went from 60,000 to less than 40. You just don't need that much traffic control because you don't have that much traffic.
In the case of Midlothian, that's a major corridor. We have Lake Park Road, which is full of industry, Schwabel's Bakery for one, a lot of semi-traffic, and there's an entrance to 680 right there too. So you're mixing a major corridor with semi-trucks and regular people driving their vehicles. It's not a good mix.
General population doesn't know the process and the requirements for receiving that money. Restricts them on how it's going to be built, because there's a lot of conversation about the bikes. So that's a federal kind of thing, when they redo these roads. For the general public, they didn't know that. I mean, it's about getting the knowledge out to everyone would help.
So all that to say, I enjoy having you all here. I hope you will apply to come back next year and be members. Also on that form, you can indicate if you're interested in positions like chair and vice chair and general policy board rep. So feel free to make a check mark on any of those that you're interested in. We'll get you involved that way too. Last thing I have, there's no resolutions, just a couple of announcements. The Friends of the Mahoning River are hosting an event called A Journey Through Time, the History of the Mahoning River, Thursday, October 12th. That information is in your packet. We'll also be in the meeting summary. Cityscape Youngstown is holding First Fridays, October, so tomorrow. Downtown, there's a number of different events. So if you're looking for something to do on a Friday night, feel free to check out what's going on there. And then Jacob Harbor also shared with me a flyer about a Blueway and Greenway watershed event that he will be holding the Youngstown Historical Center of Industry and Labor on October 13th. I'll make sure to include this event information in the follow-up as well. So if you're interested in that, feel free to support Jacob Harbor. He's doing good work. But that is everything for our meeting. Did anybody have anything to go to the order?
Yeah, you have this First Fridays. Was, I read down the list of events. It says Cheese Louise Food Trunk. Is that trunk or truck? Which one is that?
It's supposed to be true.
It's a trunk.
There's serving cheese out of a trunk.
Could be like a truck.
Steamer trunk. Mail. Something new.
They want you to check.
I'll send a note to Cityscape. Let them know your comments, man. All right, everyone. Well, appreciate you coming out. Thanks for participating, and we'll see you next month. You're welcome.
I should leave.
Okay, so
Instead of first.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Did I apply for